Okay, good evening everybody, and welcome to tonight's It's in the Ballot show. We're back in the Little Theatre tonight, this time for our regional candidates here. And over the next 2 hours, these candidates here will be answering these questions over there on why they should be elected the next regional councillors for the Lower Hutt constituency of Greater Wellington Regional Council. But with every election, there's one thing stepping in the way, and that's your vote. And good evening and welcome to tonight's show of It's in the Ballot here, live from the Little Theatre. So, with the great part is, voting started opening and we, with every election, there's more than one election there. So we've got these three fantastic candidates out of 7 who have turned up tonight on vying for the next 3 seats of the Lower Hutt constituency of Greater Wellington Regional Council. Or if I do the Māori one, it's Te Awa Kairangi ki tai. I hope I'm saying that right. Yes. Yeah. It's one of those ones if I had an auto cue, it would definitely certainly help. Now, before we sit there and get to our candidates' introductions, let's get to the electorate video, explain where the boundaries are in the voting system. Because you might notice this one's a little bit different from most Lower Hutt voters are used to. Te Awa Kairangi kai tai, Lower Hutt constituency, Greater Wellington Regional Council. The Lower Hutt constituency of the Greater Wellington Regional Council is the regional council seat that covers the district boundaries of the Hutt City Council. So you're probably wondering, what does the Greater Wellington Regional Council provide for Lower Hutt? Well, they provide many regional parks. Got the Belmont Regional Park, East Harbour Regional Park, and the Waikanuiamata Recreation Area is one of the facilities GW provides. They also provide all the public transport, including the myriad of train stations that run up and down the Hutt Valley Line and the Melling Line. They also provide the bus service, and they also are the environmental protection watchdog of the Hutt River. Now let's get to the important part, the voting system. Te Awa Kairangi ki tai, Lower Hutt constituency for the Greater Wellington Regional Council uses the voting system Single Transferable Vote, better known as STV. So when it comes to ranking your candidates, you have 3 councillor positions available. You can rank them in the order of preference, starting with number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, and so on. And you can rank as many candidates you want or as few as you want. And also remember not to put a tick on this section of the voting paper, as it's an STV election. And we have had no response from Ken Laban or Michael Stevenson. They could be apologies. I don't know. They've been invited. They've been sent the questions. So, so that's what happens, and no one came up with a surprise at the last minute turning up tonight to turn up unannounced. We haven't had that tonight. We've had that for some of our shows anyway. So let's kick off first up with Quentin. You can start off on why you should become one of the 3 councillors for the Greater Wellington Regional Council here in Lower Hutt.
Well, kia ora koutou. Lovely to be here, joining my friends Alex and David to speak with you this evening. Ko Quentin Duffy tōka wingua. My name is Quentin Duffy. I live in Belmont in the Western Hills of Te Awa Kairangi ki Tai, or Lower Hutt. There I lead a award-winning charitable trust doing work focused on building community and restoring nature. I've spent 20 years working in environmental science and policy, including for the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment and the Climate Change Commission. And I'm standing for Greater Wellington Regional Council to represent the people of Lower Hutt for climate action, for transport choices, for clean water, and for healthy nature. So we'll have a lot of content here tonight, and sit back, relax, and most importantly, don't forget to put your vote in, and I would greatly welcome your support. Number one, vote number one, Quentin Duffy for Greater Wellington. Kia ora koutou.
Okay, thank you. Next up, Alex. Why should the Lower Hutt voters give you their number one vote?
Kia ora tātou, and thank you everyone for coming out tonight. I'm the son of immigrants. I've got a Greek father and an American mother, and I love living in our city of villages. Places like Eastbourne, Petone, Wainuiomata, Stokes Valley, Nainai. Each has an incredible distinct richness and tapestry to them. For work, I work at in environmental, transport and urban development policy for the last 10 years. I've done this both in the public sector for councils, central government, and in the private sector as well. Most recently, I am a member of the Petone Community Board, at least for another week or so, and I've worked positively and in partnership with members right across the political spectrum to deliver for Petone, Moira, Korokoro, particularly around investment in our libraries and getting fast track of 10 years for Petone Wharf redevelopment. My focus is on ensuring that Greater Wellington Regional Council decision-making benefits the Hutt Valley, businesses, the environment, and as we transition to a carbon zero world. And my focus is on three things. It's on resetting our local public transport system. It is terrible at the moment, and with the number of cancellations that we have at the moment, it's simply not good enough. I'm also wanting to restore, protect, and enhance our local environment and support local groups as we transition to a zero carbon future. So a vote for me is a vote for a positive future for Lower Hutt. Thank you.
That would certainly help if I turn back on my mic. This is the joys of when your ones are hardwired on, but mine aren't. Next up, David.
Thank you. My name is David Bassett. My name is David Bassett, and I'm a former Deputy Mayor of Hutt City. One of the things I think that is very important in standing for the Greater Wellington Regional Council is that you have a very good knowledge of the city, because the Wellington Regional Council actually flies under the radar, and it's not a particularly well known what its roles are, and what is needed is somebody that is representing a city or a ward that they have a very good knowledge of what is actually needed for that particular ward. I believe I have that for Hutt City, having the experience of being the Deputy Mayor of the city and a councillor for some years. Also, I think it's important that someone has an understanding of how the regional council works. Because what is known is that the regional council has a lot of resources. It just doesn't have rates. It also has subsidies from government. It has grants from government. And there's a lot of competition. And as a result, you need to have a good understanding of how a regional council works. I believe I have that because I have had experience of being on one of the committees of the regional council and representing the city. That was the Flood Protection Committee. That has progressed. We've got the revenue now to be able to do that, the funds to do it. And I think that's a very important aspect to be taken into consideration when making any selection for any candidates. In regard to the city, I've lived here for the majority of my life. I own a business with my son in the centre of the city, and I have an apartment and a building in the city. So I have a real investment in seeing this city succeed. So I would ask you to vote number 1, David Bassett, to represent you on the Greater Wellington Regional Council. Thank you.
Okay, I did that mistake again. And you're certainly right about the regional council flying under the radar, with the exception of 2019 when they screwed up the buses. Most regional councils across the country fly under the radar. Yeah, and it's quite disappointing on that one. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. I'll take a walk across the road because you're getting 2 for the price of 1 tonight. For when it comes to, I'm going to be both Selwyn and Tenica tonight when it comes to doing our questions. So we'll see you after the break. Okay, and I'm definitely back. Okay, yep, I'm definitely back on this camera there. Okay, so welcome back tonight. I'm back on the other side of the table. Yeah, to sit there and do it. So with It's in the Ballot, we have 28 questions sealed at least 30 boxes, along with 2 booby questions to keep in the theme with the TV show It's in the Bag. One of those booby questions is dodge the question. The other one is defer the question to another candidate. If a candidate picks out a booby question, they can keep it there and then they re-pick up another number to continue with the show going. The principle behind the booby questions is for them not to be used, because if they are used, it means the candidates might be trying to get out of themselves of asking a difficult question. So that's the big plan behind that. And I can assure you tonight, and this is more for the regional councillors, not the audience, you might be a bit disappointed. I can promise you there are no questions about potholes. Only, because I do know, I don't know if that's happened with many of the candidates, but I do know our counterparts in Upper Hutt, Ros and Steve, got so many questions about how they're going to fix the potholes from the regional council perspective. Man, they don't own any roads. Actually, do they own any roads? Yeah, I don't think they do. Yeah. Okay, so let's sit there and start off with David. What box number would you like to pick? Number 16, okay. Yeah, where? That's... Oh, you're going to love this one. You've got our first. Defer the question to another candidate. So what's your replacement box number? 15. Okay. And thank goodness this is not a booby question. Question number 17 on the question sheet. What number 17 on the question sheet? What are you going to do to ensure young people's voices are heard and actioned to keep our region vibrant and growing?
That's a very good question. And I think it's something that all elected members should take responsibility for. One of the things that I will be doing is connecting with 1 or 2, probably a couple of youth organisations to actually meet with them on a regular basis and get them to actually understand the importance of local government, and in particular the role and responsibilities of the Regional Council. Not only will I give them my views on different things and what the roles are, but I'll also be trying to take the opportunity to get them to come into the council and actually sit around the table and potentially present some submissions on a particular issue which they may be interested in and which they would like to see developed.
Thank you. Next up, Alex, what box number?
Could I go for 21?
Not a problem. Yes, the drinking age used to be at, and so was the voting age. As my grandma does remember 1949 being her first election that she voted in. Okay, question number 22 on the question sheet. Do you support the use of masks, especially indoor, particularly on public transport, as an important tool for keeping COVID at bay and others safe?
I do, but I do also think it is up to the person to make that decision now. It is a central government decision, but I do think there's a lot of benefits to wearing a mask, particularly indoors and on public transport.
Okay, Quentin, what box number?
I'm asking to be number one vote, so I'll go for number one vote.
Okay, so we managed to get there in the first round. Someone chose number one. Okay, question number 28 on the question sheet. Will you get a direct bus service between Petone and Wainuiomata that runs all day?
So, quite possibly, the Wainuiomata is very poorly served for public transport, and it has just lost its direct to Wellington daily service. So one of the first things, and I'm sure my colleagues would agree, the first things we need to look at is how to rejuvenate bus service to from Wainuiomata, and particularly not just through to Waterloo Station where the buses run at the moment, but to Petone. I even wonder about a loop bus that might run through from Wainuiomata to Seaview, to Petone, to the Hutt CBD, to the hospital, Waterloo, and then back to Wainuiomata, something like that. The most important thing is there's need for transport planning expertise, and there's also need for the voices of people, of bus users in Wainuiomata to be part of the conversation and the designing of a service like this. Hold on.
Okay, David, what box number would you like? 18, no problem. Question number 4 on the question sheet. What are the best strategies to reduce flood risks?
This is a very good question, but there's no standard answer. Let me give you some examples. Flood protection for the Hutt River is a critical issue, and it's being dealt with at the moment. The strategy for that is to realign the river, to get the river to flow and get out into the harbour. But then you can't apply that to, for example, the flooding that happens around on the eastern bays of Eastbourne from the harbour. What you need there is potential walls to protect the footpath and also the roading. Stop banks are another option that can be used, but it has to be at the appropriate time. So there's no fixed strategy, is what I'm saying. No fixed strategy at all. It actually has to be particular strategies to meet particular problems.
Thank you for that, and very well detailed. Tailoring the situation, the solution to the situation. Alex, what box number?
Could I go for number 24?
24, no problem. Okay, question number 6 on the question sheet. I often want to take my bike on the train at the weekends and public holidays, but there are often bus replacements which don't take bikes. What will you do to ensure bikes can always be taken on public transport?
This is quite a challenge for us, considering that we need to spend $7.5 billion in upgrading our rail network over the next 10 to 20 years. So we will have to have bus replacements for the foreseeable future, I think. Look, it has to do with Metlink speaking to the bus operators, whether it's Transit or GoBus or Mana, and actually ensuring that those bus replacements have bike racks in the front. It surely isn't that hard to get some bus replacements with those bike racks attached to them. On the train, I think considering that patronage on the train is often significantly less than during the weekday, I don't see the problem as to why we can't have bikes on the train more regularly than potentially what we do.
Okay. And especially with planned bus replacements, it certainly makes sense about having them in there. I know the unplanned ones, it's a little bit of a lucky dipper who you get. Quentin, what box number?
Number 3, please, that being the number of major rivers in Lower Hutt constituency.
Would you like to name them off while I open up the box?
Te Awa Kairangi, Wanuiamata, and Orongorongo.
Okay, you've definitely widened my knowledge base for the night. Okay, question number 20 on the question sheet. In your view, is the central government overloading councils with regulations and legislation?
Overloading. It's an overloaded word. I think there's 2 parts to this. So one is there is central government direction through regulation, legislation, and guidelines as well that seeks to clarify responsibilities that regional council already has and should already be doing, but isn't doing it or isn't doing it well enough. So in my view, those are quite valid and very important. Councils need to have their socks pulled up by central government at times. Then there is the type of imposition or direction from central government that is adding additional responsibilities, and regional councils, especially with its very small rating base, can have great difficulty in fulfilling additional responsibilities. So that really should happen through a partnership, a funding agreement, some sort of collaboration with government on how this is. It needs to be purposeful and practical to actually implement. That's my view.
Okay, David, what box number? 22. Okay, let's pick that one off. Yes, I think when I stood in 2019 for the regional council, you could rank up to 20. Well, I think it was 24, 25 candidates. Question number 15 on the question sheet. And I better put the graphic up on the screen. What's your biggest priority for the next term, and how do you intend on delivering on that? Microphone.
There are a number of targets that I've got, but my principal one is really to see the Melling interchange and the Riverlink projects progressed quickly. There's 2 reasons for that. The first is with the Melling interchange, it's important for the safety of vehicles, pedestrians and cyclists moving between State Highway 2 and the CBD. It is very dangerous. I have personally seen a number of accidents that have happened there, and it is a very important matter to have in place as soon as possible. The second reason is, which is even more important, it's going to protect, and I'm talking here more particularly about the alignment of the river, the Riverlink project. It is going to protect the city further from flooding, and particularly around the CBD, and most importantly, around some of those surrounding areas where we've got our medical services and our hospital, and they need to be protected, not just for the central part of Hutt City, but the city as a whole. So that is my priority.
And I certainly am one who has been driven through there in 5th gear at 100k, so I know what you mean. And yes, the scary part is what happens if someone pulls out of that road, because they would be definitely gone if I would hurtled into them.
And I think the good news is that those projects are consented and funded. So unless there's an act of God, they're going to happen. So you'll get your wish, I think, David.
Yeah, or some other government comes in and then snatches the funding away to say we've got to sit there and balance the budget, which fingers crossed that doesn't happen. Yeah. Okay, Alex, what box number?
I'll go for number 5.
Number 5. Okay, question number 18 on the question sheet. Should the regional council employ a public relations team?
Yes, if it wants to consult effectively with the community.
Okay, that's very quick. Quinton, what box number?
Number 2, please. It's looking lonely.
Sorry, you can take number 4 after that as well. That's the new lonely one. Okay, this is a goodie question. Well, hopefully when you got a question. Okay, so question number 10 on the question sheet. Greater Wellington Regional Council is reluctant to initiate Resource Management Act enforcement procedures against other local authorities. For example, Porou City Council and its management of the waste water network and the treatment plant. What can councillors do to make the enforcement regime more robust, and will this be achievable with free waters?
I'll try with an answer that's not quite as long as the question. So it's understandably difficult for councils to enforce on other councils because the cost ends up coming back to ratepayers. So politically, it's difficult. But of course, when you're getting towards enforcement, something's going wrong. Someone is paying a cost, and it's usually the environment or the wider community in some way. So these are important issues. I think the first priority is for regional council to get the plans right so that the controls and the rules are in the right place. Second one is when consenting, the consenting teams need to make sure the conditions are workable and are practical, so there's less chance of not following through. And then we need proactive monitoring of outcomes, and if all those are in place, then the need to actually go to enforcement action should be low, but sometimes it is needed. With Three Waters, there's a little leg there. That will change the dynamic because there'll be an additional entity involved that won't perhaps have the same political difficulty in relation with councils for enforcement. So there will be a change. It will probably make it more robust, I think.
Okay. What box number, David? Number 27. Okay. Oh, no. Okay, question number 16 on the question sheet. Councils are being given roles and responsibilities from central government coming from regulation and legislation. These are referred to as unfunded mandates. What is your opinion on unfunded mandates from central government?
Well, firstly, when the government does make new regulations, and through legislation, obviously, and it's in terms of the Local Government Act, and it's a responsibility of the local authority, then I think the local authority should be picking it up. But where it is something different and it's not covered by the Local Government Act, then I think central government should be funding that particular task that it's given to local government.
Okay, Alex, what box number?
I'll go for number 25.
No problem. Okay, question number 5 on the question sheet. The Greater Wellington Regional Council recently failed in its oversight of our fluoridation program. Would you subsidise or cover the cost of our dental treatment for the next 5 years to make up for this failing?
I actually did wonder if I was going to get this question. No. Wellington Water is an organisation that's owned, or has got partnership between 5 or 6 different councils. It's not just the Greater Wellington Regional Council issue. Look, I do have sympathy for people, but it's an impossible thing to measure. How do you measure someone's teeth with fluoride or without fluoride over the course of perhaps a year or so?
And also, what other things have they been doing, like drinking too many fizzy drinks, or
have they been flossing?
Exactly. I think that would be one of my more guilty trends. Raspberry V's is my soft spot. Quinton, what box number?
Ka rua tekau mātoru.
Had
Well
to make
done.
me think there. Okay, question number 2 on the question sheet. Greater Wellington Regional Council has recently considered bus fares. Do you think bus fares should be free? And if so, when would you implement this?
So, yes, Greater Wellington has recently been reviewing bus fares. My view is that ideally we would move to a public transport system that was a public service and that was free to users. It's not possible to do that at the moment. The demand would be too much for the system to cope with. We all know that the system is already not coping, and that's with reasonably low demand at the moment. The reasons why I think that moving progressively towards much more affordable or even free bus fares is important is, first of all, if it was free, the administration costs for ticketing suddenly become very, very small or zero. Public transport can become much more of a convenience in terms of spur of the moment, or I've got to change my travel plans. If you don't have to think about how you're going to pay for it, whether you've brought your snapper with you, whether you've got a 10 trip, whether you've got enough cash, it suddenly becomes easier. And of course, there are equity issues across our city with people who young people don't have, or a low income family, where while the price of a ticket may seem very small to me or you, for some people it is a barrier to using public transport. So we want to move towards encouraging as much public transport use that actually makes the whole system more efficient. And so I would like us to work progressively towards a free public transport system, but it will require some steady steps, perhaps some of them in the meantime. We already have free off-peak ticketing for gold card holders. We can move that to youth. We can do other steps to move towards that goal.
And I certainly remember when my Toyota Steamer died and I was down to 0 cars when that happened. It cost me more to catch the bus to work than it did actually to drive a 2.5 litre steamer, which was quite a bit of a eye-opener when it was costing me $10 a day in public transport and it was costing me about $5 to $6 a day in petrol. So, that was quite an eye-opener for me. However, at half-price fares, I think the public transport will come cheaper at the moment. David, what box number?
26.
Got to admit, I don't own that particular steamer anymore either, but I do own another one. They're good for selling coffee out the back of. 27 on the question sheet. What would you do if elected to make our region responsive, fully accessible and inclusive for all disabled people of all impairments?
Very important question. I had some involvement with disabled people, particularly around the new Huia pool for the hydrotherapy pool. That was one of the main reasons after the hospital's hydrotherapy pool closed, to help these people. But I don't have sufficient information to know what their needs are. But what I think from a regional council perspective, we should be talking to those people to see how we can best help them and develop a budget to be able to give them some benefit from the regional council's facilities.
Thank you. Alex, what box number?
I'll go for number 28.
You seem to be the one who likes me to walk a bit. At least it's not as bad as like literally going that way and that way, like what happened at the Wainui Mata show. And I think there's another one where literally each candidate was just going to. Okay, question number 26 on the question sheet. Will you get bus shelters for all bus stops in Wainui Mata? God, that sounds a bit, what do you call it? Could be quite expensive to do that.
It is a priority for me. Wainui is an incredibly growing suburb. It's got 22,000 people in it at the moment, and 12,000 cars go over the hill each day. It's simply unsustainable to have 12,000 cars going over the Wainui Hill each day. So one of the ways that we need to do, is actually invest in the bus shelters in Wainui Mata, proper bus shelters that actually cover you when it rains, unlike a lot of the bus shelters that we see around the Hutt Valley. And also, of course, getting much more regular and reliable bus services to go with them. It's a no-brainer for me.
And will they have lights in them? Something I noticed a bit of a feature when heading out towards Eastbourne was most of the bus shelters out there have lights in them, which is quite weird considering it's nowhere else in Wellington I've seen it. Quentin, what box number?
Let's go for number 4, since I'm down that end of the table.
I was going to cheekily sit there and say, is that the age of one of the kids?
No.
Okay, question number 14 on the question sheet. Did you attend the protest at Parliament earlier this year, and what are your thoughts on it now?
I have attended plenty of protests at Parliament. I've even led a couple myself, although that was a few years ago now, but I did not attend that particular protest that I think is being referred to in this question. It's somewhat ambiguous, the protest. So, no, I was dismayed at how the protest was largely, it was a great variety of people and taken over by fascist and racist elements. So I'm not saying everyone there was. What I'm saying is there were some elements there, and that became a lot of the external view and messaging from the protest became taken over. And I was dismayed about that because some of my friends were there, and I have a lot of empathy for people who have been impacted by COVID-19 and the public health restrictions. But I did not attend the protest.
And I feel like with 2 degrees of separation, I think we probably all know someone who went there in one way or another. David, what box number?
29.
Okay, question 13 on the question sheet. This year sees the start of Māori wards. Do you believe the regional this should be extended to the regional council?
I certainly support if iwi would like to have a ward, I absolutely would support it.
Okay.
I think it would add quite a bit to the discussion, and one of the things that I would be anticipating from a Māori ward representative is full participation in the debate and the discussion of the council and participation.
Thank you. Next up, Alex.
I'll go for number 9.
Number 9. Getting a big pile of empty boxes down there. Okay, question number 8 on the question sheet. Regarding public transport, do you believe we should invest in more or less relatively? If so, how do you see us getting to the required level? And if not, what other methods do you have for tackling congestion and air pollution?
I 100% support further investment in public transport right across the region. I know we've got Let's Get Wellington Moving in the Wellington City jurisdiction, but the reality is that 75% of all new population growth is going to be north of the Beehive over the next 30 years. So if we're serious about reducing our emissions, and I think off the top of my head, about 50% of transport emission, of all emissions in the Hutt Valley are from transport, we need to be serious about getting people out of their single-occupied vehicles and into public transport. How are we going to get there? Look, it's going to be a mix of funding. The existing funding tools that we have is not going to be enough over the long term. So that's your fuel excise duty, your road user charges, and your motor vehicle registration. That's not going to be enough over the long term. We need to be bold, and we probably also need to be looking at things like congestion charging. And I know places like Auckland are looking at congestion charging, and we should also be looking at congestion charging in the long term. Because if not, we might as well pack up and move out, because the seas are going to rise and our beautiful communities are going to go.
I don't know how that will fly on Jackson Street, but that definitely is one that I know on the weekends is very clogged. Quentin, what box number?
12, please, because Christmas is just around the corner.
Oh, God, yes.
Did you need reminding?
It's all right. It's 2 more GST periods away. And you've got dodged the question. Oh, no. You can have this get out jail free card, and then if you don't use it, then it sits there and tells the public, you answer all questions. Even when given the opportunity to get wheezy way out of it, you don't. So what's your replacement box number?
Okay, number 10, please. Downing Street.
Okay, question number 12 on the question sheet. A councillor resigns 12 months before the next election. What would you propose to do with the vacancy?
So I would leave it vacant. I think that any other option is prone to political bias. So the law requires a re-election to happen, or by-election to happen, if it's before 12 months before the next election, and then gives the council the choice within 12 months. If it's very close to the election date, there's obviously very little benefit in re-electing. If it's a bit further away, well, there is some argument for having a by-election to have another councillor. But I think actually best that existing councillors redouble their efforts in engaging with the community, because any method you choose to either select or appoint someone to fill that is likely to be politically charged at the time. So I think it's best to leave it vacant and just ask more of councillors to get out there and knock on some doors, be more visible.
Okay, David, what box number? Oh, you stole that one from Alex. Was that going to be your next number?
No,
The one where Shannon got rid of all the letterbox numbers. That's what happens when you used to live in Shannon for about 6 months. Okay, question number 25 on the question sheet. What are you going to do? What are you going to do to make sure young people can drive change in the region?
Well, I think it goes back to what I originally talked about when I talked about working with young people. And I think it's important that elected members actually do work with young people to help them with their aspirations in terms of change. And that's really the approach that I would adopt, just as I have said before. Work with them, get them into the council, give them an opportunity to have a look around and see what it's all about, and have an opportunity to sit around the council table with the other elected members to actually involved in some dialogue in moving forward with youth opportunities.
Okay, next up, Alex.
number 13.
What were you going to say?
I was just going to add that it'd be great if we could encourage more young people to drive buses, because that would really change one of our big problems in Greater Wellington. So one of the changes that young people should help drive is buses.
Well, I'll get there. You can have a bit of a nosy at the back of that.
Sam has a heavy vehicle passenger driving license.
Well, I
of
don't have the
some sort,
passenger
yeah?
part, but I've got class 2.
Okay, can drive trucks.
funny enough, I set my test in a manual, and I've only driven automatic since. It's quite funny, that one. However, I drive manual every day, so, you know. Question number 24 on the question sheet. What will you do for people with invisible disabilities in the community to safely use public transport and other such facilities and feel part of the Hutt city?
I think there's a couple of parts here. It's looking at what can Greater Wellington do itself, what levers can Greater Wellington pull, and particularly for me, one of my focuses is on improving health and safety and accessibility for our train stations and at our bus stops. You know, a number of our train stations were built in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, and still look like they were built in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. You know, we've got to be serious about ensuring that our public transport is accessible for people. And the other part of that is actually working with Hutt City Council and forcing them to invest in those basics: footpath maintenance, traffic calming measures, those kind of infrastructure maintenance that means that people feel safe using the footpaths, crossing the road. You know, for example, I live just off Jackson Street, and there's been a number of elderly people fall over. I've fallen over on my face. It was a bit embarrassing, but you know, I managed to get up in one piece, and that's because the council hadn't invested in their footpaths for the last 30 years.
Potholes.
And potholes. But as part of that, though, it's also working with those disability groups and groups who represent people with accessibility issues to target that investment and to work alongside with them to get investment that actually is going to benefit them the most.
Okay, Quentin, what box number?
19, please.
And this is very tailored for your party affiliation. Climate change is one of our biggest threats. What will you do personally to role model decarbonisation? I'm a little bit jealous because you've already gone one step ahead of me.
Well, first of all, I would say that it's not about what I personally do, but it's about the system changes that we need to make, because I have the privilege of having a number of choices in my life that others in our community don't necessarily have. So it's about creating the possibility for people to have those choices. For example, I bought an EV a couple of years ago.
That's what I'm jealous of.
Sam's jealous of it. And it's great. It's a cheap and cheerful one. It doesn't get us very far, but but not everyone can do that. And so public transport is a much higher priority. So I prefer not to look at climate change through the idea of it being a sort of a competition for who's got the biggest halo. I take an approach. I mean, I do things, but I'm not going to list them all. I prefer to be involved, so to be active. Part of the Hutt Carbon Network, for example, an active part of the Hutt Cycle Network, standing for regional council. In my own community with my own charitable trust, we work on providing recreation opportunities that are close to home. So the 1,000 or so, a couple of thousand residents in Belmont and Kelson can simply have plenty of options to walk their dog just outside the door. You don't have to hop in the car and drive across town. So it's about those community level and those system level changes, not so much about the personal role modelling. However, as a regional council, we all should use public transport lots, because we are role models for our own system, and you learn about its benefits and its foibles by using it. Not every regional councillor does, and I highly recommend we all should.
Yes, you're certainly right there, and I've had an interesting report seeing through some of the expense claims. David, what box number?
I have 17.
It's a good lucky prime. Is it prime number? I think it is a prime number. It's also the date I was meant to be born on, but came 5 days late. Okay, question number 3 on the question sheet. We all recently discovered that there was no oversight of the fluoridation program and that our teeth have been rotting away on the regional council's watch. What steps will you put in place to be sure this does not happen again?
Well, firstly, I think we have to look at the responsibilities of the councils here. The regional council is responsible for collecting bulk water and then passing it on to the territorial local authorities, of which we have 8 in the region. It's really very much, fluoridation is an issue that has to be made by the respective territorial local authorities. But having said that, I recognise that this was a mistake happened under while the Greater Wellington Regional Council was supplying that bulk water. But what it tells me is, yes, something went wrong, it's past, let's move on, what do we do for the future? And this is the second part of that question. What do we do for the future? I think all local authorities, and including the Greater Wellington Regional Council, need a report on a quarterly basis with appropriate KPIs, not just about fluoridation, but about quality of water, full stop, and a range of other KPIs, which is in relation to the quality of equipment, what breakdowns have happened, what challenges have happened. But we also want to know about the successes. And I know Wellington Water has had some great successes. But that, I think, is the approach that should be taken, because what that is all about is actually providing, or the regional council providing, good governance for our region. And that's what the critical issue is about.
Thank you. Alex, what box number?
I'll go for number 14.
Very scenic bus route in Wellington. I think also in the PTOM contract, it's the most expensive one per kilometre as well. Okay, question number 19 on the question sheet. Do you think climate change should be the #1 concern at the ballot box?
Yes, I do. And I say that because climate change is here and now. And we're in the middle of an emergency. We've got fires in Greece, we've got floods in Pakistan, we've had, it feels like 6 months of torrential rain here in the Hutt with hundreds of slips. It's here. And everything that we can do now to mitigate or offset emissions, all that we can do, all the levers we can pull now, means that in the future, I feel a lot more optimistic about the future that we will have. So everything for me ties back into climate change, whether it's public transport, whether it's our regional parks, housing as well, carbon emissions from housing, heating our homes, a whole lot. It all ties back to climate change.
Okay, Quentin, what box number?
Number 11, please.
Number 11. Another prime number, which I don't think is any more a bus number in Wellington anymore. Okay, it's number question 1 on the question sheet. As more farms are turned into pine forest, how will this affect the requirement in the future for poplar poles to control erosion?
Can I ask who wrote the questions?
Um,
It's a good question, but it's very specific.
That one might have been Jill Greathead. That one, I'm thinking. Just trying to think where. I'm just trying to think that, because that one's regional council specific, and it's very early in the sheet. Yeah, it was one that trying to think. The Robinstein for GW and the Te Awa constituency knew off the back of her hand.
Very good. So the basics is that planting trees on land is in general good for preventing erosion. The problem with pine forests is that the vulnerable time is when they're harvested. And with climate change causing more extreme rainfall, then it's a double risk at harvesting time for pine forests. So we looked at this closely when I was on Whaitua Te Whanganui-a-Tara, which was the council community water planning group. I was a community representative there. And we recommended stronger controls around pine forests and greater setback margins from waterways to mitigate this risk. I visited Hapua Farm in the Wairarapa, where they are using a mix of poplar poles and other alternatives, restoring wetlands, planting native trees, planting redwoods and other highly valuable exotics. So there are different ways of changing and adjusting land use to control erosion. The other farm I'm familiar with is right behind my house in the Belmont Regional Park. So it's actually Greater Wellington's own farm. And on that farm, there has been very little control of erosion to date. But that is changing now as we are retiring the erosion-prone gullies and restoring it with native forest rather than pine forest, which is much more robust in terms of controlling erosion long term. It obviously doesn't have the harvest that pine forest has.
Okay, David, what box number? Number 20. Okay, question number 23 on the question sheet. What do you think will be the three biggest issues for the Regional Council in the next term, 2022 to 2025?
Can I say another good question? I've given a lot of thought to this issue over quite some weeks while I've been on the campaign trail. And from what my three issues are, first of all, climate change is first, but it's also a long-term objective, more than just the 3 years, obviously, that this question is asking. The second thing is public transport needs to be got on with right away and put back into some good shape. My third one is funding. We hear talk about we want to do this, we want to do that. It's all costing. I don't know whether it's known, but the regional council rates over the last 3 years have been just over 28%. In the last 2 years, it's been just over 25%. That is unsustainable. We have to be looking at the whole funding of the projects that we're talking about. So those are the three issues that I see that will be facing the Regional Council in the next 3 years.
Okay, Alex, what box number?
I'll go for number 7.
Okay, question number 11 on the question sheet. Regional Council representatives have been absent from meetings, but not sure of whoever wrote that, whether that's accurate or not. However, they might be thinking that all regional councillors and everywhere eat their lunch and not do any work. That might be the reason why they've set up. How will you be active for how will you be active for the community across the triennium?
One of the things I really want to do is lift the profile of the regional council here in Te Awa Kairangi. It has been pretty much invisible. And so what I want to do if I am elected is to hold regular clinics across the city. I also want to be engaging with community groups and also working with the community boards as well as Hutt City Council and others in terms of lifting the profile, but working positively and collaboratively as well. And for me, you have to go to meetings. I won't be wagging any meetings.
I haven't heard the term about wagging for a long time, but yes, I do remember that was quite a common word used in the college days. Quentin, what box number?
6, please. The number of people still in the audience. Well done.
I know. Some of them have probably, I don't know, might be feeling like, I don't know. I thought the mayor was the most important role election to vote for, not the rest of them. Okay. Another fluoridization question. Question number 9 on the question sheet. Wellington Water has been without fluoride for some time. What is your response to that?
Grrr. I mean, I could play my card and dodge the question because it has been addressed in one way or another. I'd just say I think it was a real failure both of senior management and of governance in Wellington Water. And I think councillors were quite taken aback and shocked as well. And it's given everyone a lesson that actually one of the roles of councillors is to think quite laterally and to ask those questions that you're not really sure if they're actually going anywhere, but you've got to start opening up the questions and be open-minded and then follow through. One of the fluoridation was bad enough, but to then hear that initial responses from Wellington Water were actually inaccurate and potentially obscuring what was actually going on, to me, that's actually a very poor sign too of some institutional culture work that is needed there. So there's a lot to learn from that. I've had some dealings with Greater Wellington and other departments, and where there's also been breaches of the Resource Management Act, for example. So I've learned a little bit about what can go on and the importance of people in the community and councillors asking those questions and not giving up at one answer, but actually following it through. And because there's a balance to be struck as an elected representative between being a leader for the accountability and asking the hard questions, and also being constructive and collaborative with the partners and officials that you're working with. So there's a balance to be struck there, and I think we can learn from the fluoridation debacle, I'll call it.
And what were you about to say?
Can I just make a comment on that? I mean, one of the things that I admire Wellington Water for what it did, from a governance perspective, saw the issue, got on with it, and had an independent review to show that there was absolute transparency around the process. And I say, well done, Wellington Water.
Thank you. And it sounds like you might be having a few more people around the Chief Executive Review panel than just the Chief Executive. Okay, so we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be coming back for hard-hitting questions.
We're driving cars on a Mars tonight. We're blasting off to the stars tonight. We wanna go, go. We wanna go, go. We're driving cars on a Mars tonight. We're blasting off to the stars tonight. We wanna go, go. We wanna go, go.
natter between our candidates' audience, like what happens in every single break. But now it's time for hard-hitting questions. It's in the ballot. Was my mic turned off? Okay, let's sit there and start that one again. Okay, so with hard-hitting questions, these are the most topical questions that our voting members would like to sit there and ask. A very big one that keeps getting asked repeatedly is free waters reform. So that's hard-hitting question number one. So with hard-hitting questions, we go one by one with each candidate on how they answer the question. So let's sit and kick off with hard-hitting question number one. What is your position on free waters reform and why have you come to that? Alex, let's kick off with you since this is where your first time starting off.
I support free waters reform. If you take a national lens, councils right across the country have failed to invest in their water infrastructure. Parts of Auckland City is a classic example. There's raw sewage getting pumped into Mission Bay with the rain overflow. Until very recently, we had raw sewage into Wellington Harbour as well. And if you just look at the bill that we have over the next 30 years, which is $1.3 billion just for the Hutt city alone, we can't afford $1.3 billion unless we significantly cut expenditure and other infrastructure and other amenities that people want, like libraries, parks, roads, potholes, you name it. I do have concerns about the size of the entities and whether we potentially will lose, I guess, that local voice that we currently have with ownership and management run by Hutt City Council. But on the whole, I support Three Waters.
Okay, next up, David.
Now, I definitely support reform of the Three Waters. A number of reasons for that. Nationally, there is a lot of challenges in maintaining the Three Waters through local government. I only just have to think when the government passed the legislation recently to have a monitoring agency, one of the first things they did in the first 3 months, they found that there were quite a sufficient number of local authorities that needed to boil their water before it could be drunk. I can't recall the exact number, but I thought it was in the sort of 20 area. Now that is very significant. But the whole tip of the iceberg for the need for reform has obviously been what happened in Havelock North some 5 or 6 years ago. I do have some concerns, and some of those concerns, one is that the governance of these entities. I'm comfortable with the size, I'm comfortable with the areas that have been selected, but I am concerned about the governance. It is critical that we have people on those entities that actually have the skill in engineering, finance, law, having actually experience of driving an infrastructure organisation. I haven't seen that fine print yet on just how that's going to be formed. The other point that I am concerned about is the assets and how they are going to be passed over to the entity. Now, there's a real issue for local government because the assets are currently on the local government, each individual local government organisation. It's on their balance sheet. And councils use that as security to raise loans to enable them to do other activities. Now, that's an important matter for the local authorities to be able to secure loan monies. I'm sure that can be worked through. So I think the other critical thing, and I certainly will be pushing, if I'm successful in getting on the Greater Wellington Regional Council, I will be pushing to enable our community to have a say and have an input before we derive our final decision to move forward with the reform in whatever form that is.
So clearly we need plenty of work to be done on our three waters, our drinking water, our wastewater and our stormwater systems. I think of the suburb of Kelson near my home. It's a relatively new suburb in Lower Hutt, about 50 years old, but the wastewater pipes there are asbestos cement with a 50-year lifespan. So the whole wastewater system for that suburb is actually due for replacement. That's just replacement. Then there's the deferred maintenance. And then there's the upgrades we need to our water systems, because let's not forget the fourth water, which is often overlooked in this, and that's the natural water, the water that we swim in our rivers, the water that sustains the fish, the life, the bird life, our streams, our rivers and lakes and harbour. And it's the failings of our three waters, taking too much water for drinking, leaking from wastewater pipes causing pollution, and stormwater causing erosion and breaking down stream banks. That's affecting the fourth water, our natural waters, which is actually one of the treasures of Lower Hutt. And we simply need to not just catch up with the deferred maintenance, not just to upgrade the things that have come up for renewal, but we actually need to do a lot better. And that's a massive task. And it's not just about funding, it's about realizing the cost at the moment is actually falling on our communities and on our fourth water and nature. So we have to move here, and it's going to take a while to shake down, but we will get there and we will make improvements, I'm confident.
Vaccination, and whether you have any affiliations with Voices for Freedom, Freedom Rights Coalition, or any other organisation involved in the occupation. Let's start off with Quentin.
I'm a big supporter of public health initiatives, even when it curbs it might be a imposition on me in order to look after others in our society who are more vulnerable, like my elderly mother, or younger or immunocompromised friends and family. I support public health measures for the wider community. Also support the weight of evidence of science that says that the vaccines are safe, and so on. The other part of the question, no, I don't have any affiliation with the Voices for Freedom, Freedom Rights Coalition, or any other organisation involved in the occupation of Parliament.
Okay, next up, Alex.
I too support vaccinations. I have serious asthma. My mother has emphysema, and I've got other family members who have health issues as well. And I completely agree with Quentin's sentiment. I don't have any affiliation with any of those groups either.
Okay, and David.
I think we're all pretty well in agreement here. I strongly support the vaccination program, and I don't mind saying it. I was first in line, and I've had all 5 that I have needed. And I have to also say that I think the Department of Health and the public health system has done a great job on the work that they have done. They've been absolutely fantastic, and I'm absolutely for what they have done. In terms of if I had any affiliation with Voices for Freedom, Freedom Rights Coalition, or any other organisation involved in the occupation of Parliament, the answer is absolutely not.
Okay, thank you. Now let's get on to hard-hitting question number 3, which I've been specifically asked to do this, and I'd just like to sit there and know, no, they have not paid me any money to do this. I wouldn't mind a donation to It's in the Ballot because we're doing self-funding, but this wasn't done. This was a nice, lovely message to the Facebook page saying this is needed. New Zealand Coach Services has just announced number 18 bus will be discontinued. In order to replace this commercial service, would you endeavour to get a route from Wellington to Wainuiomata to reconnect for a Metlink tender service and expand it to a 7-day-a-week service? Let's kick off with David.
I got to say, first of all, very, very disappointing to see that service cancelled. I would strongly support the service being picked up within the realms of the Greater Wellington Regional Council. But in having said that, I would want to know a little bit more about why the bus route was actually canned. Is it not being used? Does it need more promotion? There's some issues around something that went wrong in that the patronage just wasn't there, and I'd really like to know a bit more about it, but in principle, I'm right in behind getting it back on. Thank you.
Okay, Alex.
I fully support it. I think, as I've mentioned before, we need to dramatically improve our bus services that go to and from Wainuiomata. Alongside that, we also need to invest in the bus shelters, and the footpaths, and the traffic management as well, to make sure that people can get to the bus shelters and use the regular and reliable services safely. I fully agree that it should be brought under Metlink in the P-time contract. For me, I echo Quinton's earlier viewpoint in terms of public transport as a public good, and there's a wider benefit about reducing congestion as well, particularly with the 12,000 cars that go over Wainuiomata each day.
Quinton.
Yeah, so I used to be a regular user of an equivalent number 85 service, which ran direct to Wellington from Eastbourne, and it was, as a commuter, it was fantastic. So it's very sad to see this service go. It should always been part of the Metlink network, and currently it doesn't attract the public subsidy for public transport, and that's part of the problem. The Wainuiomata does not have a train service, and it does not have a ferry. So the importance of having really good bus services to and from Wainuiomata, not just through to the Hutt Central Business District and Waterloo, but through to places where people need to go, like Wellington if they work there, like Petone, becoming an increasingly shopping destination, places like the hospital. We simply need to do a lot more. And actually, I'm very optimistic that the incoming council will move very quickly on supercharging the bus services from Wainuiomata, including a direct service to Wellington. I'm optimistic on that.
And some interesting things there that I do know the reason why the 85X was discontinued, it was merged in with the 81 because of the traffic congestion on Petone Esplanade. It no longer was really an express service. So it was actually quicker to run it down Jackson Street picking up passengers than it was to actually run it down the Esplanade, with the way how Morning Peak has kind of turned on the Esplanade. A great way of describing it is try merging about 5 times between the traffic lights by Petone Wharf until when you reach Horokiwi Road. It's quite a lot of merge. So I do know that was something to do it, and I do know from what I heard was NCS ran the number 80. Literally, it sat on break even for quite a long period of time. And the good thing was, Malcolm wasn't trying to exploit it as public service. He was looking at it as a way of providing employment, and if it paid its way, he kept it going, which is unfortunate in that one. But if it goes out to tender, he can put in a tender, and hey, who never knows? He could pick up the service.
It's also a shame because it's been one of the most reliable bus services, where other services have been hit by cancellations and so on. In this bus service, NZCS has actually run it extremely reliably.
It was one bus, so it would have been one bus and one driver per service going out, which is not normally the case with most services. Normally you have a shift card of about 4 to 8 hours, depending what it is. But I think that one was literally one driver, one bus, every single service. So that would probably explain for its reason for its reliability. So, do we have any fantastic questions from the audience? I was wondering. No hands? Okay, let's get to closing statements. Oh, okay. Yeah. You can grab the second mic. Have you turned it on? Oh, on the mixer. It's what happens when you're trying to do a few things at once. You can always become Squidward Tentacles or SpongeBob SquarePants if you want. Yes, go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. My question is to do with the community boards. The community boards in this last triennium, I didn't say that word right, sorry, have not really had as much interaction and as much councillors from the regional council at the meetings, and as not been, from what I understand, it hasn't been as good as it would. I want to know if what you guys are going to do to improve this relationship that we need.
Who wants to kick that one off?
I'm happy to start. The community boards are a creature of Hutt City Council, of course, but the interface and the attendance. Goodness. Excuse me, someone was talking back to me with my own voice. But it's very important that Greater Wellington Regional Councillors attend them, because it's a connection with the community at a much more local level than most forums for region across the region. I think equally important is residents associations and other community groups. So there's a lot more regional councillors can do to be regularly present at many levels of the community. I've attended all three community board meetings over the last, all three community boards and their meetings over the last few months, and really enjoyed and learnt a lot from just listening and meeting people at those. So I think all three of us, no doubt, would be keen to use them as a great forum for connecting with the concerns, the issues, the ideas of local communities, and be reporting back on what's happening at regional council level, and then taking what's learnt at those community board meetings back to the council table.
Who wants to go next?
Yeah, I can go. I sit on the Petone Community Board at the moment, and I have to say that current regional councillor involvement or input into the community board is inconsistent at best. I guess for me, the community boards are a conduit between the community, between Wainuiomata, Eastbourne, Petone, and the regional council, and we have a duty and an obligation, I feel, to actually be at each of those meetings, and whether all three of us show up to the same meeting, or whether we take turns, or whatever it is. It's about working in partnership between three councillors, and working with each of those community boards as well, because the best intel comes from those community boards. So I would be very keen on fostering that relationship with each and every one of those community boards.
David?
Well, I think it's all been said. I have a respect for community boards. I don't actually think they have sufficient funding to do some of the things that they want, and they're really empowered with very limited authorities, basically, to do things, which is disadvantaging them. But I think the concept of regional councillors visiting and talking with the community boards, and I think all three, if the three of us are elected, I think would be a very good approach to be able to sit down with you and just talk about the issues for the potential to move forward. But I think it's also important that the council itself, the mayor and the councillors, are aware of what we are doing. We do not want to work in isolation, because what we do have to do is actually work together. It's not a regional council here and a city council there. It is actually must be working together to get the results. And we have some really big issues, as we know, with the climate change, transport. It is absolutely critical. So we would want to be working with the council and the council knowing and fully aware of what we are doing and talking to the community board.
And as I can sit there and say, I'm a member of a residents association. We have a nickname being known as the NRA, but we're the Newtown Residents Association, and I can confirm we do frequently see our 5 Pornakey Wellington councillors rotating on a basis there. So I do know that they are in Wellington, the regional councillors, and along with the city councillors in most areas, are quite frequent to their local residents association meetings. So it's definitely useful. And I mean, Darren Ponta's been absolutely brilliant with both his role of Let's Get Wellington Moving, being the chair there, and being the chair of the regional council. He's actually really helped it, because Let's Get Wellington Moving is literally where one of the suburbs earmarked for a whole heap of changes. You know, and yeah, I mean, some of us for and some of us against. I would love to see light rail run down the middle of our suburb. Some others have a little bit different concerns, but you know, each their own. And I mean, you know, the great part about Newtown is we have 2 hospitals, a zoo, and the Governor General also lives in our suburb. yeah. Where's the mic? But yeah, after that, we'll flick to closing statements.
Just
Kia ora koutou. So I've kind of got a 2-part question, and I'm a real big believer on how you do the small stuff is how you do the big stuff. And connected to that question around community boards, for me is a huge part around engagement. So my first part of that question is, where do you currently reside? And the second part attached to that is, how do you do community engagement from that basis? Kia ora.
I live in Petone. I live pretty much just on Jackson Street. And as a member of the Petone Community Board, I guess my focus is on working with local groups and individuals who represent groups to get their views, to get their ideas, and you know, the whole list of groups, whether it's the Historical Society, the Rotary, Plugging for Petone, you know, there's a number of groups I'm heavily involved in, all have relationships with, and I think you know, you need to have these connections and understand what's happening in your backyard in order to be able to advocate for your community.
Well, I, as I think I said before, I have a business with my son in the middle of the city, and we meet a lot of people daily. I have had a history since I became an elected member on Hutt City Council for Saturday mornings to actually spend time moving around the ward and the city to actually glean information to what was going on, and also to identify problems and challenges that people were having. And then I would spend probably an hour or so writing to officers to enable those solutions to be looked at, investigated, and resolved. And I think certainly from the feedback that I have been getting over particularly this last campaign that I've been doing, that feedback has been acknowledged very, very regularly. And one of the other things is that with the liaison, particularly that I had with the community, the Central Ward, I've been the first and only elected member to actually get back on the council unopposed. And I think that was really very, very satisfying and very surprising to me. But again, it was relating to the people.
Quinton?
I live in Hill Road in Belmont, where I lead a local charitable trust I mentioned, the Pararaho Forest Trust. So that's actually been a learning curve for me as I was one of the initial group that founded this trust a few years ago, and we had an initial concept, but it's grown organically in a way that we weren't expecting it to, and it's become a much wider, from the original 5 people, it's now a community of about 500 people, and 200 or 300 of those will be active volunteers. It's incredibly inspiring. I get a lot more from it than I put into it. One of my main ways of approaching community engagement and roles in the community is to never get stuck at one level of input. So for our local trust and for the Friends of Belmont Regional Park that I've also been leading, I do advocacy work that involves presentations to council, that involves submissions and the accountability and the follow-up with government agencies and testing whether systems are working. There's also the facilitation of people in the community, because a lot of people are keen to contribute, they're just not quite sure where to start, so a bit of facilitation can help bring out the wonderful skills that are there amongst us in the community. And then I also like to, when I can find the time, muck in myself and get out there planting trees, pulling up weeds, pulling rats out of traps, and so on. And for me, it's by operating at all those levels that it really, someone's whistling at me, it must be good. That it's, you can be authentic, and you can not have it all become about you, but actually about us facilitating and working with the community, working alongside as needs unfold. Another great thing I do locally, or have done in the past, is the local walking school bus, running 18 years long, the Lower Hutt's longest walking school bus. I do very little now, apart from say I'm a bit too busy, I can't walk it today, sorry. But it's been a wonderful thing where people have come and gone, children really love it, it's a community, and it's a sort of a little hub of community activity. And sometimes it's those little things and those little ways of engaging with your neighbours, with your community, that make all the difference. And I think there's a lot of that we candidates can take to council.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, now let's click off for closing statements. David, would you like to start off with your closing statement of why the Lower Hutt voters should give you their first preference vote?
Well, firstly, as I said before, I think one of the critical things for electing your members, I think the critical thing is for considering electing your members to the Greater Wellington Regional Council. I don't know whether you're aware, but 2 of the 3 current councillors have actually retired, and therefore I think we're needing some experience around that table, and I believe I have that, having been the Deputy Mayor of the city and also Chair of the Council's City Development Program and the City Finance Committee as well. And I think that's going to be an important factor in actually negotiating, with my experience, to glean our share of the substantial amounts of capital and money to develop what we want to in our city. So the key thing is knowing what the city wants. I believe I know that. And secondly, I know how the Regional Council works, having been on one of its committees, and I believe I can do real justice to the citizens of Lower Hutt. So finally, thank you for listening to us, and I want to thank the team for what you've done tonight. I think it's been really good. And I just want to say, I'd ask you, when you do come to vote, that you consider voting for me, number 1, to the Greater Wellington Regional Council to represent you. Thank you.
And I just want to ask, because you were one of Ray Wallace's deputy, are you also a Doctor Who fan? I do know that was something that Ray Wallace and I used to actually, we're both Doctor Who fans, so it was quite interesting finding all about that, but I wonder if that actually translated amongst the team.
Interesting, he has endorsed me, so it's been fantastic.
Yeah. No.
As I might add, the most senior regional councillor Prue Lamison, who has retiring, and she has endorsed me. So, you know, it takes some pride in that. Thank you.
No problem. Alex.
Our city has challenges. Our region has challenges, and to do with climate change, transport, housing, and we need to think laterally. You know, we can't keep doing the status quo, which we've been doing for years and years and years, and look where it's gotten us. You know, I've got over a decade with experience working with the RM. I've recently worked with the RMA reforms. I've worked with the land transport system. I've worked in local council. I've been an advisor for the deputy mayor of Auckland. So I understand council systems. I understand council processes. I understand legislation. So for me, I'll be able to hit the ground running and be able to actually be a force for Te Awa Kairangi, because I don't think over the last 10 years or so we have had a strong voice. I don't think we can look at the councillors that we've had in the past, particularly some of them in particular, and a couple who are, one in particular who's retiring, as a strong voice for our city. You know, they've been invisible, and I want to be that voice. I want to be that champion for our city and our communities.
Okay. And are you for a chance a Doctor Who fan at all?
No.
Okay. No, I thought I might start that as the random question they can go around at this show. Yeah. Quentin, now, are you a Doctor Who fan?
Yes, as a child I was a Doctor Who fan, and I can say that my mother went to acting school in London with one of the Doctor Who's.
Which one?
That I'll have to research and get back to you on. I wouldn't want to get the name wrong.
I will accept that one of Don, you know, trying to get out of it. That makes sense. So, what's...
The core responsibility of Greater Wellington Regional Council is to care for our environment, our physical environment. So it's about our land, our air, our waters, our harbour, lakes, rivers and streams. It's about the health of our forests. It's about our climate as well. And therefore it's also about pipes and transport and the things we've heard a lot about tonight. But fundamentally, it comes back to good outcomes for our environment, because we love, it's a key part of Te Awa Kairangi that we love. It's the place we live. It's what surrounds us. It's what gives us enjoyment and what makes us love living here. So that's the sort of work I have been involved in, both at a sort of policy type level, but also active in the community, leading groups, mucking in, facilitating action to do good things. So I encourage you to vote this election for action, for getting things done, for practical, for positive activity to care for the environment that we love so much in Te Awa Kairangi ki tai. So I encourage you to vote number 1 for Quentin Duffy for Greater Wellington Regional Council. Thank you.
And thank you for all our candidates for attending this evening and putting your feet to the It's in the Ballot fire.
Thank you, Sam.
Yeah, thank you. It's quite good. I was, you know, was wondering who was going to be here, and I'm very happy with what show we've ended up with. And it's, you know, hopefully we have a couple of Hutt voters who are a little bit more informed when it comes to the regional council and how to cast their preferences for votes, considering it's an STV election. Okay, so let's get up to the fun part. Tomorrow we've got the Paikakariki Raumeti Ward for the Kapiti Coast District Council show at the Raumeti Bowling Club. So feel free to pop along if you're on the Kapiti Coast or watch online. I can confirm both Sophie and Richard will be there. So they'll be following some of the Hutt 2 candidate 100% attendance rate. Then we've got on Friday, we've got Northern Ward of Hutt City Council at it's next to the library. What's the name of the venue next to the library? It starts with K. Yeah, Hub. Yes, that will be where the Northern Ward of the Hutt City Council show, because, hey, we've got to bring it in the ballot to Stokes Valley, you know, because I'm trying to think what else goes there. You know, so that was definitely a focus of mine. It was like, where in the communities can you sit there and bring the shows? And then for Sunday will be our final It's in the Ballot show for the 2022 local body elections for the Patanui ward of the Porirua City Council at Patanui School. So we've got a bit of a full-on part, and then we can go and have a break. Because I think, it's been, was it 6 weeks? Nearly, it'll be 6 weeks by the time we finish this, of doing show after show after show after show. And I can say, from the audience I'm seeing here, some of them I've seen at every single show of their corresponding areas of where they've lived. And I thank them for showing the support to It's in the Ballot. This hopefully will become one of the features of local body elections for many, many years in the future. Fingers crossed. And also, on the other hand, thank you, Andre and Ray, who are in studio, and Eddie, who's coming remotely from Auckland, for their roles for participating tonight. Just like to give a little reminder to Eddie, tomorrow make sure you have web camera working. I would like to sit there and do an official goodbye, considering that will be your last show for the It's in the Ballot season. So we can sit there and do that ready for tomorrow. So yes, from us here at the team It's in the Ballot, we'll see you back tomorrow night at 7 p.m. at the Raumati Bowling Club. Good night.